I Think In My Life was the first song that I wrote that was really consciously about my life, and it was sparked by a remark from a journalist.
Kenneth Alsop asked John Lennon why his songs were less revealing and challenging than his books.
In My Life started out as a bus journey from my house to town, mentioning every place I could remember, and it was ridiculous. It was the most boring sort of what I did on my holidays bus trip song, and it wasn't working at all.
The song wasn't working. I know this feeling. It's pretty likely you know this feeling. In fact, it's quite reassuring to know that people like John Lennon felt this feeling too.
But then I laid back and these lyrics started coming to me about the places that I remember.
People love these stories of when inspiration strikes.
The idea of your favourite artist waking up being struck with an idea.
I've had an idea.
Crossing the road and suddenly having a light bulb moment of inspiration.
I've had an idea.
Walking the dog and a lyric or a melody just popping into their head.
I've had an idea.
We love these stories, but the song still needs to be written. A songwriter hones their craft over years. They practice, they develop skills, they listen and they learn, and they amass an archive of knowledge to draw upon when crafting their inspirations into fruition. John Lennon practiced writing songs by writing hundreds of songs. He will have learned from listening to his heroes, learning their songs, and emulating the greats like Chuck Berry, Bob Dylan, the Everly Brothers, Elvis. He will have learned from everywhere. And we should learn from our heroes too. In My Life is a great song and it's beautifully crafted. I feel like I learn something new every time I hear it. When I listen to it, everything just sounds right. There are a lot of interesting chord changes happening, but they sound as though they flow seamlessly together, and I want to understand how they've done this. The song starts with a 1-5-6 sequence, A major, E major to F sharp minor. These chords are all diatonic and they define the key that we are in, which is A major. But then we go to an A7 chord. This is where things get more interesting, as this A7 chord contains a G note. This is not in the key of A major. When I learned about keys, it was like I suddenly knew what I was doing, and I liked knowing which chords worked together, and it was much easier putting chord progressions together that sounded good. But then I remember feeling kind of trapped. I didn't ever leave the key, and I did start to feel like I was following a set of rules.
This isn't what songwriting's about.
I realised that I'd come to learn quite a bit about how keys worked, and I needed to learn more. Then I was introduced to secondary dominant chords, and it was like a new world of possibilities suddenly became available to me. They sounded different and less predictable to me, but they also sounded good, and it was like I was taking stuff I already knew and expanding that knowledge. The A7 chord in My Life is a secondary dominant. Dominant chords have tension to them that feel like they want to resolve and to move to somewhere else. Typically this chord will resolve to the 1 chord or the tonic chord. In the key of A major, the 1 chord is A major. A major has the notes A, C sharp and E. And the 5 chord in the key of A major is E major, which is commonly used as a 7th chord. So E7 has the notes E, G sharp, B and D. Notice that in the E7 chord we have the notes G sharp and D that are only a semitone or a half step away from the notes A and C sharp that are in the A major chord. These semitones or half step changes are called leading tones. Leading tones are when the notes resolve or lead to another note by a semitone or a half step. When we play an E7 chord to an A major chord, the leading tones make this chord change sound as though we're being pulled back to the tonic chord or the 1 chord. The 5 chord in a key is the dominant chord, and technically we could call this the primary dominant chord. Secondary dominant chords are chords that are not from the key that we're playing in. We are borrowing the 5 chord from the key of whichever chord we are changing to. Because of the leading tones that a 5 to 1 change has, they sound good even though we are using notes from outside of the key. This A7 chord in My Life is leading us to the D major chord. This A7 chord is the 5 chord borrowed from the key of D major, which makes it a secondary dominant. Now, as this D major is the 4 chord in our key of A major, the secondary dominant is called the 5 of 4 chord change.
See, John Lennon will have learned this chord progression, and it's likely that he won't have known what it was anyway, and does that really matter? You know, you don't really need to understand something to be able to use it. He'll have heard this chord progression somewhere and just like the sound of it. Secondary dominant chords go back hundreds of years, and they were used in jazz music that Lennon would have likely heard when he was growing up. He'll have even heard his heroes such as Bob Dylan use them. For example, Dylan used a secondary dominant idea in the song Don't Think Twice it's alright.
The other interesting thing about this A7 chord is that they have inverted this chord. The chord we are now playing is A7/G. Now this just means that we're playing an A7 chord, but we've changed the order of the notes, so the G is in the bass of the chord. This chord still functions as a secondary dominant, but this change to have the G in the bass has added a completely different flavour to this chord and to the progression. The leading tone movement between an A7 to a D is the reason this chord change works so well. And now we have the F sharp of the F sharp minor chord leading us into the G note, connecting these two chord changes as well. This is very clever. No wonder these changes sound so seamless. This A7/G chord on its own sounds a little strange, but when you hear it in context, it just sounds right, because of how it is leading us from the previous chord change and into the next chord change. When I learn a song with chord inversions or slash chords, my mind always automatically goes to...
This was probably written by a piano player. Chord inversions are much more common on piano than they are the guitar, especially when you think of the left and the right hand doing different things melodically, creating these kind of counterpoint or contrapuntal movements.
Given the fact that all of the Beatles could play the piano, it's not too much of a stretch to imagine them using this idea and then applying it to the guitar. From this A7 chord, we come to a D major chord. So let's see what happens here. The D major chord that we are now on is the 4 chord in the key of A. Now the 4 chord in a key going to the 1 chord sounds good, but there isn't the same pull that a 5 to 1 chord change has, because there aren't the same leading tones that are pulling you towards the 1 chord or the tonic chord. Look at the notes of the D major chord compared to the A major chord. D major has the notes D, F sharp and A. A major has the notes A, C sharp and E. There is the note A in both chords, which is a common tone, and there is a C sharp, which is a leading tone to D. This chord change does sound good, but if we want to create a really satisfying pull towards this 1 chord, we ideally would have 2 leading tones. If we change from the D major chord to a D minor chord, we will be turning this F sharp into an F. This means that we now do have 2 leading tones from D minor, getting us to the A major chord. The D major chord has an F sharp, the D minor chord has an F, and the A major chord has an E note. This is a chromatic movement leading us to this A major chord. The minor 4 chord change is a very common change in most styles of music, and it has been for a long time. It was used in a lot of pop songs, especially ballads and jazz standards. I often find that when I add this chord change to a chord progression, people will comment that it sounds like the Beatles. This idea of playing the 4 minor chord is almost seen as a cliche now because it's used so much. But I don't really care. I love the sound of it. It has almost a nostalgic feeling to it. And whenever I want to create a sense of nostalgia, it's the first thing that I look to use.
In My Life has a very nostalgic feeling to the chord progression, and it fits the sentiment of the song perfectly. I mean, it's about the places that he remembers and the people that he's loved throughout his life. There's a lot of technical things happening in this song, and its chord progression in particular, but none of it's there for the sake of it being technical. It's all being used to make the song what it is. A great song. I don't think you'd believe that we've only looked at 4 bars of this song. John Lennon may have been inspired to write the song because of a remark made by a journalist, but the song wasn't initially working. Then after working on it for a little while, the real inspiration came to him. I genuinely think that we can all have these moments of inspiration that just come to you, but then it's your job as a songwriter to craft this inspiration into something. Whilst you're waiting for these moments of inspiration to come to you, why not work on the craft and the art of writing songs? John Lennon practiced writing songs, and he learned about writing songs by simply writing songs. John and Paul wrote hundreds of songs, and I'm willing to bet they wrote hundreds more that we never heard. Listen to songs, learn something from them, and then practice writing songs. This video explores some other things that I've learned from another one of my heroes. Check it out. It might have something in it that you've never thought about that you can add to your archive of knowledge, ready for when inspiration next hits you. Thanks very much to my Patreon supporters over on Patreon. Head over there, check it out, ask questions so I can make videos just for you people over there on Patreon. Thanks very much, guys. See you next time.